Some mysteries were never meant to be solved. Some crimes left no clues. And some people vanished forever. Welcome to Mystery Ledger, where real mysteries are uncovered.
1873. The sun sets over the Mediterranean, but the real story is just beginning inside the grand halls. Inside the casino, fortunes rise and fall with the hypnotic spin of a wheel. Roulette, a game built on mathematical certainty. The house always wins. It is a fundamental law of the room, a certainty that keeps the lights burning. But for several nights in a row, that certainty vanished. The house started losing, heavily. The wheel wasn't random, it was flawed, and one man, Joseph Jagger, had seen the crack in the armor. For 6 days, Jagger and his team watched. They recorded every single spin, looking for a pattern in the chaos. In a world of friction and gravity, perfection is an illusion. Even a masterpiece of engineering can have a bias. They found it on one specific wheel. 9 numbers appeared more often than probability allowed. It was a gold mine. Jagger walked to the table and placed his bet. He wasn't gambling, he was collecting a debt the machine owed him. Win after win, the pile of chips grew into a mountain. By the time they realized the defect, Jagger had won millions. The casino eventually found the bias and fixed it, but the legend of the man who broke the bank lived on, a reminder that even the most perfect systems are built on flawed foundations. History is full of these small fractures, you just have to know where to look. Roulette appears simple. 37 pockets, one spinning ball, a game defined by pure, unyielding chance. In the grand halls of Monte Carlo, the math is the law. A small house edge, just 2.7%, that's all it takes. Over time, probability guarantees profit. The numbers never lie, and the bank never loses sleep. It's a machine designed for certainty. But that certainty depends on a single, invisible assumption, that the system itself is perfect, and in 1873, it wasn't. Every machine wears down. Every wheel has a soul and a signature. Joseph Jagger knew that if he could find that signature, he could own the house. It wasn't about luck, it was about observation. Watching for the tiny mechanical stutters that the human eye usually ignores. The casino believed in the power of the house edge. They didn't realize the edge had shifted. The game was no longer theirs to win. Because when a system is flawed, the impossible becomes inevitable. Monaco, 1873. A man steps off the train. He doesn't have the look of a high roller or a nobleman. His name was Joseph Jagger, an English engineer from the cotton mills of Yorkshire. He didn't come for the glamour, he came for the machines. While others were blinded by the glitter of gold, Jagger saw only gears and spindles. He understood machinery better than he understood people. He believed in one absolute truth: no mechanical device made by human hands is ever truly, perfectly balanced. To the casino, the wheel was a symbol of fate. To Jagger, it was just a piece of engineering, and every engineer knows that every machine has a soul and a breaking point. He had spent years in the mills of Yorkshire. He knew how friction, wear, and gravity worked over time. He knew perfection was a lie. He didn't have millions to bet, but he had a theory that could bring the most powerful bank in the world to its knees. The siege of Monte Carlo had begun. For 6 days, Joseph Jagger did not place a single bet. He didn't come to gamble, he came to witness. He hired 6 clerks to act as his eyes. Their mission was simple but grueling: record every spin, every number, every rotation. Every outcome was a piece of a larger puzzle. A puzzle the house believed was impossible to solve. Thousands of spins recorded in absolute silence. The rhythmic clatter of the ivory ball was the only soundtrack to their investigation. They were looking for a ghost in the machine, a bias that shouldn't exist in a world of perfect math. 6 days of boredom. 6 days of being invisible ghosts in a room designed for noise. The tension wasn't in the game, it was in the data. By the 4th night, exhaustion was setting in, but Jagger was tireless. He knew the machines better than they knew themselves. They met in the shadows to exchange their findings. Each ledger was a report from the front lines of a mathematical war. And then the noise began to clear. A pattern emerged that defied the laws of probability. One wheel was lying. 9 numbers, appearing more frequently than chance allowed. Wheel number 4 had a signature. It had a bias. It was a mechanical flaw Jagger had predicted, a tiny misalignment in the spindle that turned the house edge into a hunter's advantage. The investigation was over. The math was absolute. Jagger now held a weapon more powerful than any fortune in the room. He walked to the table, not as a gambler, but as an engineer ready to collect. The illusion of randomness was about to break. The trap was set. The house was about to lose its crown. He wasn't there to play. He was there to execute a plan. Every step was calculated. Every breath was controlled. His capital was limited, but his conviction was absolute. He knew something the casino's mathematicians didn't. He placed his first bet, calm, calculated, focused. The room around him continued its frantic, desperate dance. The croupier called out the familiar refrain. The wheel began its hypnotic rotation. Fate was in motion. To the aristocrats, it was a moment of luck. To the house, it was probability. To Jagger, it was just friction and gravity at work. The whispers started. Who was this man? Why did he look so certain in a game designed to foster doubt? The ball rattled. It skipped across the brass dividers, a tiny white ghost searching for its home. And then it stopped, exactly where his data predicted, exactly where the mechanical flaw demanded it go. This wasn't luck. This was engineering. The bank's greatest weapon had been turned against itself. High above, the house was starting to notice. A single win is a fluke. A pattern is a threat. And they were being threatened. He didn't celebrate. He just collected his winnings and prepared for the next spin. The operation was only beginning. Jagger was no longer an observer. He was the most dangerous man in Monte Carlo, and he was just getting started. The math had shifted. The house was no longer the master. The casino's ledgers began to bleed. For the house, it was a biological impossibility. The bank was losing its lifeblood. Managers gathered behind closed doors. Panic was a silent guest in the boardrooms of Monte Carlo. They were looking for a thief, but they found only shadows. They checked for every known trick. No magnets hidden under the tables, no mechanical devices clipped to the wheels, no accomplices among the staff. Every wheel was inspected, every dealer was watched, but the system appeared perfect. On paper, the house should have been winning. Yet, the losses mounted, thousands of euros flowing out of the vault every hour. The threat was real, but it was invisible to the naked eye. The math was failing. Probability, the god of the casino, had seemingly abandoned the house. The panic was turning into desperation. They looked at every winning player with a hunter's eye. But how do you catch a man who isn't cheating? How do you stop a man who simply knows the truth? The flaw was invisible. It wasn't in the players, and it wasn't in the bets. It was hidden in the very grain of the wood, in the microscopic wear of a spindle. To anyone else, it was a masterpiece of craft. To Jagger, it was a broken machine, and he was the only one who had the manual to fix his own fortune. The bank was being humbled, one spin at a time. The legend of the man who broke the house was being written in the casino's own red ink. The house always wins until someone changes the house. Jagger had done the impossible. He had found the ghost in the machine. Outside, the world went on as usual, but inside, the empire was shaking. The panic is real. The losses are absolute. Overnight, the house made its move. They replaced the wheel. Jagger had tampered with math, quietly, carefully, expecting the threat to vanish. The casino believed they had won. They changed the battlefield, thinking Jagger's edge was tied to a single machine. They were about to learn that Jagger's real weapon was his mind. Jagger returned. He sat at his usual table, prepared to continue his harvest. But something was different. The machine didn't respond like before. He lost. Then he lost again. The pattern was gone. The house edge had returned with a vengeance. The managers watched from the shadows, smiling. He paused. A lesser man would have kept betting, chasing the ghost of a lost advantage. Jagger did something else. He stopped gambling and started observing. Again. The clock started again. Thousands of new spins, new data points flowing into his books. He was searching for a new mechanical soul. No two machines are ever the same. No two flaws are identical. But in 1873, Monte Carlo's inventory wasn't perfect. The second wheel was also biased. And then he found it. A new signature, a different set of numbers. The house had changed the lock, but Jagger had already forged a new key. The second strike was even more devastating. He wasn't just winning money, he was proving that the house's perfection was an arrogant lie. The panic returned sharper this time. The house had used its best defense, and Jagger had simply walked around it. The bank was bleeding again. The house changed the battlefield. Jagger simply adapted. The only thing more certain than math is human error. He had broken the bank not once, but twice. The engineer had mastered the system. The legend was now absolute. Wins continued. The hypothesis had become a harvest. And across Monaco, the whispers were no longer just whispers. They were headlines. The myth of the unbeatable house was dying. One man from Yorkshire was doing what kings and emperors had failed to do. He was winning, systematically, relentlessly. The air in the lounges grew thick with anxiety. Investors who had built their fortunes on the casino's certainty began to feel the floor shifting beneath them. The losses were so severe that for the first time in the history of Monte Carlo, the unimaginable was being spoken aloud, the possibility of total collapse. This wasn't just a bad run, it was a mechanical execution. Jagger was draining the vault faster than the casino could replenish it. The house was bleeding out. The owner watched the wheel in a deafening silence. It was his masterpiece, his empire, and now it was the weapon being used to destroy him. By the sixth day, Jagger's winnings had reached over 2 million euros. In 1873, that was an astronomical sum, enough to shake the foundations of any bank. The math had truly flipped. The casino was no longer the hunter, it was the prey. One engineer, armed with nothing but a theory, had nearly bankrupted the capital of gambling. The crowd didn't just watch him, they studied him, they wanted his secret, but you can't steal a discovery that lives inside a man's mind. The wheel kept turning, but for the casino managers, every rotation felt like a countdown to doom. The system they trusted had betrayed them. The bank almost broke, and it all started with a tiny flaw in the wood. In the end, even the most perfect systems are vulnerable to those who know where to look, because in the dark, every fracture is visible. The siege was over, the house survived, but it was never the same again. The legend of Jagger was now absolute. The bank was humbled, the engineer was rich. Eventually, the silence of the managers turned into action. The wheels were recalibrated, every spindle tested, every pocket measured. Precision improved. The mechanical souls of the machines were wiped clean. The edge that Jagger had spent weeks hunting was disappearing. The chaos returned. The math of the house was restored. The battlefield was no longer tilted in favor of the engineer. But Jagger didn't wait for the inevitable losing streak. He didn't chase the ghost of his discovery. He knew when the machine was no longer his. Jagger walked away, voluntarily. He didn't flee under cover of night. He simply stood up from the table and stepped into history. He left as the sun began to rise over the Mediterranean. The gaslights were flickering out, and the era of the flawed wheel was over. He left with a fortune, over 2 million euros. In today's money, a sum that would make even the modern titans of industry pause. He returned to the cotton mills of Yorkshire, not as a worker, but as a legend. He bought property, invested in his community, and lived in quiet comfort. The engineer had out-engineered the house. He had turned a mechanical defect into a legacy that would be whispered in these halls for over a century. Joseph Jagger saw the flaw, and he had the courage to follow the math into the unknown. He died in 1892, a man of wealth and mystery. But his story belongs to the ages, and to those who still believe they can beat the odds. The departure of Joseph Jagger left more than just an empty seat at wheel number 4. It left a permanent scar on the industry. After Jagger, the age of innocence for the house was over. Casinos began rigorous, daily wheel calibration. The math became a shield. Engineers were hired to test the balance of every spindle. Every pocket was measured to the fraction of a millimeter. The mechanical soul was under siege. Statistical monitoring evolved. The clerks were replaced by algorithms. The house learned to watch for patterns before they could become prophets. But Jagger's true legacy wasn't in the euros he took. It was in the truth he left behind. He didn't cheat the game. He simply exposed its fundamental imperfection. He proved that in a world of cold machines, there is always a human trace. A mechanical device is only as perfect as the hands that built it. The wheel wasn't random. It was a product of human wood, human metal, and human error. In every sense of the word, it was human. History is full of these fractures. You just have to know where to look, and once you see the crack, the whole system changes.
Some mysteries are solved, and some are forgotten, and some are still waiting. You're watching Mystery Ledger. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you in the next investigation.